Welcome to Grameen Foundation's podcast series, Women in Agriculture. We discuss ways in which we can transform systems, mindsets, perspectives, behaviors, and actions so that rural-based women farmers and women entrepreneurs can show up with their full power. I'm your host, Lakshmi Iyer. On today's podcast, we'll be speaking with my amazing India-based colleagues about our new gender strategy for our project called Mandi, Market Access Enabled by Digital Innovation in India. Mandi is a project aiming to strengthen farmer-producer organizations in eastern Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal. With phase 2 of this project, we are zooming in on how the 50 farmer-producer organizations that we work with can increase their services to women smallholder farmer members. We will be discussing the learnings we gained from phase 1 of our project and how phase 2 is aiming to incorporate those learnings. With that, I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Neha Singh, Senior Program Manager, and Purna Roy Chowdhury, Associate Director. Welcome to you both. Excited to have you here.
Thank you, Lakshmi. It's our pleasure completely.
Happy to hear with you both.
Great. And Neha, I was hoping that we can actually turn to you first, as you've been with the project throughout phase 1 and well into phase 2 now as well. Would you briefly describe for us what a farmer-producer organization is actually? How does this entity, FPO as we'll call it, work with smallholder farmers? And what is their model of service provision?
Thank you, Lakshmi, for this question. Before moving into what FPOs do and how they function, let me delve into why there was a need of forming and strengthening these farmer-producer organizations in India. So, as you know, that India is an agriculture-dominant country and is also dotted with the presence of small and marginal farmers who have less than 2 hectares of land. Since they don't have enough land for cultivation, they simply lack the negotiation power to acquire high quality inputs, farm equipments, extension and training services, and finance to support the agriculture work. The worst of all issues arise when farmers attempt to sell their produce in the market. Since they have less agricultural land, which means their produce will also be on a lower end, which again compromises their negotiation power to sell it through the institutional channels in the market at the fair rates. So there is a huge information asymmetry as well that places these farmers in a very disadvantageous position to access the higher value markets or the larger markets and better price discovery for their produce. Since the fragmentation of land is increasing day by day, and it's going to increase the number of smallholder farmers as well through the fragmentation of land. There are several attempts undertaken to address these challenge and limitations of smallholder farmers, and these attempts have been launched through the central sector efforts. And one of these solutions were the formation of farmer producer companies. The Indian government launched a flagship program for the formation and development of FPOs, as these FPOs work on the principle of economies of scale that has the potential to solve the challenges and limitations of the smallholder farmers that I have just described. So, coming back to your question about what these FPOs are and what they essentially do. So, if I have to describe the FPOs, I would say that the farmer producer organizations are formed through the shareholding of smallholder farmers in their catchment areas to provide them aggregation support for their produce and suitable backward and forward linkages, coupled with financial and extension services, and also some sort of ag-tech services as well. Since these FPOs are formed through the share contribution of the farmers, the control remains to the shareholders, and they they act as the owners of the FPCs, which is a significant departure from the other forms of FPOs or the collectivization of farmers. So the model of FPOs is being promoted by national and state level governments across India to strengthen the agriculture value chains that farmers work on. As the FPOs on the work on the core principles of economics of scale, they essentially provide quality inputs to the smallholder farmers at subsidized rates, bring extension and advisory services on board, and provide aggregation support to the agricultural produce, and bring institutional market linkages on the table so that the farmers can have better price realization to their produce. So essentially, they work on the aggregation model both for the backward and the forward side, so that the farmers can have better and subsidized inputs, and can leverage the high value markets for better price for their produce.
Just to add to what Neha has mentioned, I would like to give a background as to how the FPOs have evolved in India. So in 2003, there was an amendment of the Companies Act in India. And the farmer producer organizations, commonly known as FPOs, emerged as a new form of aggregation model in the country with the purpose of facilitating smallholder commercialization and increasing farmers' incomes. Now, since then, there has been consistent push from the central government of India to promote FPOs in India. In fact, the latest being this new central sector scheme, which is titled Formation and Promotion of 10,000 Farmer Producer Organizations. And that was launched in February 2021 with an implementation period of 5 years. The objective of the scheme is to improve the income of small, marginalized, and landless farmers, and also to create more employment opportunity. Now, this scheme puts FPOs at the center in facilitating this enhanced access to credit, better market linkages, better inputs, and technology for these farmers that Neha was mentioning. And interestingly, our work in the Project Mandi 2 is also advancing this 10,000 FPO central sector scheme, working alongside various other stakeholders in the ecosystem. Now, what I would also like to highlight here that the guidelines for this scheme has no mention about the minimum number of women FPOs to be formed, nor is there any mention of the minimum number of women shareholders in a mixed FPO. But this only creates an opportunity for Grameen Foundation to promote and capacitate FPOs integrated with a gender inclusive strategy. And this is to be done for women farmers to come together, be recognized for their contribution to the agricultural economy, and also, and very importantly, to have a seat at decision making and market facing roles in these FPOs.
Thanks, Neha and Borna. That gives us a really good comprehensive picture as to what farmer producer organizations are doing and the services that they're providing their smallholder farmer shareholders. What about women? I'd love us to get to that within the context of rural, worldwide, global agriculture, right? Women are typically considered invisible labor, but they're often the backbone of agricultural communities. In India, we know they comprise 70% of agricultural labor. So I know that Purna mentioned that there's an opportunity that exists now with the 10,000 farmer producer organization scheme to center more on women. So what about these women smallholder farmers, and how can farmer producer organizations cater to them a little bit more? Neha, I wonder if I could turn to you first. Would you mind describing some of the changes that we're aiming to get to with these 50 farmer producer organizations that we're now working with in Mandi Phase 2 when it comes to gender mainstreaming?
Yeah, sure. We have been working in the parts of Eastern Uttar Pradesh for last 2.5 years through several project activities, and Mandi is one of them. And we chose this Eastern Uttar Pradesh region because it lags on several socioeconomic indicators. And if we talk about the FPOs and the women farmers, we found out that the FPOs really don't have any specific value proposition for women farmers, as the prevailing perception is that the um, that FPOs are for men and the SHGs are for women. So, since women are mostly the invisible force in the agricultural landscapes, I believe that FPOs have not done much for bringing these women to fore. We think that the gender mainstreaming aspect is so critical for the overall development of agricultural landscape in India, because more than half of the work is accomplished by the rural women only, as you also mentioned. And if we make these women folks devoid of all the suitable and productive opportunities, extension, tech support, farming household will lose a big chunk of monetary gains and household incomes that they can take advantage of. So, in the light of all these perceptions and the developments that are ahead of the women farmers, their families, and FPOs, we have been working to sensitize and make these FPOs, first of all, aware about the roles and importance of the active women shareholders, like what benefits they can bring to the overall business profitability and sustainability of the FPOs. So when we started, we found out that a handful of FPOs had women on the share list, and that too were dormant, like they were not doing anything, because as I told that the FPOs didn't have any proper value proposition for these women. So we started with the increasing the representation of women in shareholder as well as the board, by conducting several trainings on gender and power dynamics to remove the structural barriers, and also conducted household level gender dialogues where we included the family the and the spouse of those women to diminish the cultural barriers which are so etched in our society in Eastern Uttar Pradesh. Also, the introduction to gender inclusive value chains created avenues for women to participate in different nodes of value chains, which was initially just limited to being actors at the sowing and harvesting level in the entire cropping season. So, in this case, we are trying to shift the representation from representation to more participatory role of women, both at the board and the shareholder level, by improving their decision making and agency in the FPOs by clearly chalking out the intervention nodes in the gender inclusive value chains. And also, we are deriving some of our learnings from the project level women empowerment in agriculture index study that we conducted for 2 long years. And we are also incorporating those learnings here so that the women can become women can take charge of the agricultural value chains. So the higher level outcomes that we envisage here in this phase two is the improved representation and participation of women, elevating their ownership and decision making in the FPO business management and the overall value chains, from seed selection to the market access and value addition in the primary commodities or the raw produce they work on, and increasing their resilience by linking them with farmer welfare schemes. So this is the overall picture that we want to envisage in the current phase, and also the things which we want to leverage based on the Mandi one accomplishments.
Great. Purna, I'd love for you to jump in here if you can. How did we fare during Monday One with what we aim to achieve on gender mainstreaming? Neha touched upon it a little bit when she talked about intra-household dialogues. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that. as we were increasing representation in terms of women membership and women board of directors, what did we take into consideration? How did we do it?
Sure, Lakshmi, I would love to talk about that. So, taking a cue from what Neha mentioned, where she so articulately explained why gender mainstreaming is so critical within the FPO ecosystem, I must highlight that one of Mandi One's key successes lies in the deliberate positioning of a gender lens within the project objective, and also in some of the key interventions of the project that we implemented. Now, as highlighted by Neha, the project intervened with gender intentionality at three levels: at the FPO level, at the level of the households to address the cultural barriers, and also at the level of the individual, the woman herself. To elucidate further, so at the FPO level, Mandi One worked intensively to increase the representation of women as FPO shareholders and also as directors in the board. And this was also mentioned by Neha. Now, this was important to establish visibility of women farmers and create an avenue for their active participation in these FPOs. So, when we started the project, Lakshmi, we had an average of only 12% of the shareholders of FPCs who were women. And after 2 years of the project, the representation went up to an average of 38% in the project areas.
Wow.
Now, talking in terms of actually real numbers, almost 13,000 women were enrolled as members within the 40 FPCs that we worked with. And as for board members, around 60 of these board members were women that we included as the board of directors among these same 40 FPCs. So these were at the FPC level. Now, coming at the household level, the project conducted rigorous community and intra household dialogue with both male and female participants. And the aim of this activity was to engage in sensitive and inclusive dialogue with the members of the family for women to pursue as shareholders within these FPCs, and so that they can actively engage in FPC decision making and effectively leverage from the various linkages and benefits extended by these FPCs, which were also kind of mentioned by Neha, and what kind of benefits that are offered through these FPCs. But the dialogue kind of facilitated or intended to facilitate the spousal and family support that was so important for women's active participation. And coming to the individual level, at the women's level themselves, the project also worked extensively with these women in the target communities. And given the fact that for most of these women, this was their very first sensitization on their role in the FPOs as members. And the project did commit to deliver and build an initial and common understanding on the role and the value for women in these FPCs, not just among the women, but also her immediate community, which we also did through the community and intra household dialogue. So, on this front, the project facilitated gender awareness trainings where over 11,500 stakeholders, including BODs, the CEO of FPCs, SHG members, and family members of the women shareholders, they were all trained on issues related to women's participation in FPCs. And also, by the end of the project, I must mention that more than 1,600 women from about 162 SHGs were linked with 30 of these FPOs, boosting women's engagement with these FPOs through post harvest and value addition economic activities. So, these are just the snippets of what we were able to achieve in Mandi One in terms of gender inclusion and also in increasing women's visibility in agricultural activities. But I must emphasize that it indeed took the team rounds and rounds of dialogue with all stakeholders of the project that sustained throughout the project period, the entire 2 year period. And it was only at the end of the project that we started to see little but important shifts in women's participation and engagement with these FPCs. So, bringing back what Neha mentioned, that the barriers and challenges for women is so deeply entrenched in social and cultural norms
Yeah.
that to bring about even the slightest shift towards women's inclusion takes immense amount of time and effort. So we are glad that Mandi 2 has given us the opportunity to continue to work in the same communities to potentially move the needle further towards gender transformation.
Yeah. And it seems like, Purna, just taking a page from what you're saying, which is so fascinating. I mean, intra-household dialogues and taking on kind of like a tripartite level approach to this, targeting the farmer producer organizations themselves with their board of directors, working on a household level to shift perceptions there, and then supporting the woman to envisage herself as a key player in the ecosystem. That's a really hard thing to do. And it sounds like what we've done so far is to shift representation. And by representation, we mean numbers of women farmers becoming shareholders of these FPOs. And what I think what you're saying is that this is the foundation. This is the foundational piece for what we want to do now when it comes to gender mainstreaming.
Yes, Lakshmi, we moved the needle on improving the women representation on the board and on the shareholder list. But we also understand that in order to generate transformative shifts, we needed to introduce certain mechanisms that could increase or improve participation of women as well. For example, the FPOs did not have business plans to support women farmers, and so women farmers were not actively participating in FPO activities, be it as the shareholders or the board members. And women also did not see the value in actively participating in FPO matters, which means that they did not regularly attend meetings and they did not regularly get involved in the various services that the FPO was providing, as the prevailing mentality was that the SHGs were for women and the FPOs were for men. So we tried shifting this perception by making changes like um, bringing the gender and power dynamics trainings in a more inclusive way, and the gender dialogues at the household level in a more deliberate way for the overall engagements of household members. We also intervened by integrating these two institutions, FPOs and SHGs, and shift the perceptions, already prevailing perceptions regarding the FPOs and the SHGs. Our interventions are creating mutually beneficial linkages between the FPOs and the SHGs working in the same communities. So I forgot to mention here is that to the listeners who don't know about the self-help groups, these SHGs are community-based institutions that offer their female members financial literacy, training and savings credit services to their members, female members, but they often struggle to link their members to more remunerative market opportunities and productive areas. So here comes the role of the integration between these two community level institutions, FPOs and SHGs. So because by joining FPOs, SHG members can gain improved access to market and finance, and in turn, FPOs can gain a platform to address the social norms that impede women's market participation and their motivation to join the FPOs. Therefore, I believe the integration of FPOs and SHGs have the potential to open productive opportunities and market-facing roles for women farmers, as well as the FPOs to get more force to work on the value addition aspects, thereby improving the overall revenue of the FPOs. So deriving the learnings from the phase one, we learned that this integration has to start right from making the business plans and capacity development plans of the FPOs more gender inclusive, which was a total miss from our end when we were intervening in the phase one. So in phase two,
Mm,
I must emphasize that it is working as a stepping stone for us to
mhm,
make the governance, management, and operations of the FPOs more participatory and inclusive.
mhm.
Long way to go, but I'm hopeful that together we'll be able to make significant and positive impact at individual level, household, and community levels as well.
Yeah, and as Purna says, I mean, it takes a lot of time to shift those types of perceptions. So it sounds like a really good approach to be able to marry what's already on the ground, i.e., self-help groups that are largely comprised of women, and join hands with these farmer producer organizations that are typically seen as male comprised, but comprised of men farmers. I want to go back to a point that you mentioned, Neha, because I think it's really fascinating, and I think it may bring up some other points as well. And I'd like to ask Purna, Purna, could you unpack this for us a little bit? So, if I understand it correctly, women were becoming shareholders of FPOs, but they didn't necessarily see the advantage in actively participating. Could you talk about that a little bit? What was that all about?
Lakshmi, thank you so much for this question because it's such a pertinent one. And it is true that, one of the biggest resistances to women being onboarded as members of FPOs and also actively participating in these FPO meetings came from among the women themselves. And the key learning from the project also highlights that the primary reason affecting and prohibiting women's participation in FPOs are time availability and restricted mobility. So, the deep and direct engagement with women and their household re-established for us the very truth that women are engaged in varied activities throughout the day. They toil as agricultural labor in the farm, and they are also engaged as in unpaid household care responsibilities, which led to disproportionate burden of work on women. And amidst this reality, women do not seem to find the time to engage with these FPOs and the activities of the FPOs. In
Mm,
fact, our interaction with the women members clearly brought out the fundamental question of what is the value proposition for women engaging with these FPOs. So the project, while it went into the granularity in explaining the various kinds of benefits that the women could leverage in being associated with the FPOs and how that in turn would benefit her household. Yet we realized that we need to probe further into assessing and understanding the drudgery of
mm,
women across to be engaged with these FPOs. So,
mhm,
our preliminary understanding and findings also say that the drudgery takes away much of productive time and energy from women, inhibiting their holistic participation, inclusion, leadership, and also empowerment in various aspects of her own life. Therefore, going forward, I think our intervention must consider addressing and reducing drudgery so that women can effectively and actively engage with FPOs without considering the engagement as an additional burden.
mhm. How do you just what is drudgery? Purna, can you just define it really quickly? And then could you touch a little bit upon how are we going to do that? Drudgery sounds really kind of entrenched. How are we going to be able to address that in Monday too?
Well, drudgery can be defined as anything that is, physical or mental strain or
Mm,
monotony or hardship that is experienced by a person. And here we are talking about the experience that the woman is facing. So, our experience working with women in agriculture clearly illustrates that most of the work that women do on the farm are so labor intensive and, of course, drudgery inducing, like the work they do, like threshing, dehusking, cleaning, grading, and also livestock care. So women usually perform in these farm tasks in traditional ways, using traditional equipment and methods. So, these women are having to invest a lot in both agricultural and household work, with absolutely dismal returns. And this becomes the source of extreme drudgery on them. So, Lakshmi, so going forward in Mandi too, we will look into two very important aspects to reduce drudgery for women so that they are able to eventually draw these benefits as members of FPOs. So, one would be to promote women friendly technologies to women shareholders. And the project will look to identify and create awareness around the drudgery reducing tools and equipment. Like we did it in Mandi 1, the project did introduce certain agricultural tools for reducing drudgery, like the manual hand ridger for sowing vegetables on the ridges, or the twin wheel holes for weeding, or the rotary dibbler, the manual double screen grain cleaner, etc. So these were the some of the tools that were introduced and extended to women through the FPOs. But in Mandi 2, we are going to focus a lot more in extending innovative women friendly techniques and machinery to reduce the drudgery without, also it's important to mention here that without adversely impacting their reduced demand for labor. Now, also additionally, we will work with SHGs to identify women-friendly value chains and other livelihood opportunities, which are associated with the one farm approach. And the project will also ensure that the products and services that are extended through the FPOs are near and in the vicinity where women physically are, so that they don't have to travel a lot to avail these services.
Mhm.
And most importantly, the intra household dialogue that we spoke about. These will be rolled out in Mandi 2 as well. And this will focus on the drudgery suffered by women and the gender role stereotyping of drudgery related to their tasks on the farm and also within the households. So,
Yeah.
in a nutshell,
Mm.
the project will continue to engage with men, women, the FPC, and the community stakeholders to create a larger enabling environment to support women's participation in the farm and household and also in the FPOs. And, also Mandi 2 will be focused on building women's agency, her resilience, her entrepreneurship, her income to bring about these desired shifts towards women's active participation and facilitate the change in men's role and their contribution within the households and breaking the gender role stereotypes. And these are the ways we can actually truly address the issue of drudgery for women.
Thank you so much, Purna. Couldn't have said it better myself to sum it all up. I think I want to leave it at that. It was a really great parting segment. So thank you, Neha, and thank you, Purna, for both being here today. I look forward to having you both on another episode where we talk about how the representation to active participation is actually working for not only the FPOs but women and their households and communities as well. So I look forward to speaking with you both in a few months' time to see how everything is shaping up. Thank you both.
Thank you, Lakshmi, and thank you, Neha.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi, and thank you, Purna, for amazing discussions and questions.